Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Yakov Horowitz, and welcome to our beginner Chumash class. And this class is designed really to teach you the mechanics of Hebrew language in order that you should be able to really become an independent learner of Chumash. So if you've never had a background in Chumash before, or honestly, if you've gone to yeshiva or school and learned by rote, this will be an opportunity to really help you understand the fundamentals of how Hebrew learning works, and with the idea of being able to help your children. I'm going to start with a piece here. Have a look at the screen on the left side. This is the beginning of a piece that I wrote in Mishpacha magazine 13 years ago. And it's about the same topic, teaching children to become independent learners. And as you can see there, more than 90% of all the words in Chumash are variations of just 270 root words. It's actually 93%. And when I started teaching nearly 40 years ago, the study was released by a professor in Bar Ilan University. And it really struck me because I personally did go to yeshiva where I did learn by rote rather than a skills-based. And it just seemed like such a logical thing to do. So 26 verbs and 38 nouns appear more than 500 times each. And if you want to have a quick look, I did attach all of these handouts to the, I attached the handout to the section, the comment section here, the chat, so you can have a look yourself. And these are actually shorashim here, Hebrew verbs according to frequency of occurrence. So you have 26 verbs that are listed between 500 and 5,000 times. It's really remarkable. And you have the same thing for nouns again. Again, you can download the list from the comments. But the basic idea is that if you can understand how Hebrew works, that there are root words and there are prefixes and suffixes, then you really can become an independent learner relatively quickly. There's an 8-page sample that's also attached to your to the comment section, the chat section here. And this is what our Bright Beginnings Chumash workbook looks like. You do not need to purchase it for this class. Everything you need is here. And basically what we have here is the translation of the words, but they're actually broken down rather than translating an entire verse, an entire word or phrase. It's divided up. So Vayomer, if you have a look at this word Vayomer, the translation is "and he said," and typically you would just understand it that way. But if you look at the way it's broken down, the shorashim, if you break it down like this with prefix and suffix, you're able to have a much better understanding of what the word said. So if you look at the word vayomer, I'll use the cursor instead of coloring. The vav means and the yud is he, and the shoresh is the letter amar. Now, generally speaking, all Hebrew words have a shoresh of 3 letters. And if you look back to that common shorashim list, again, it's attached to the chat section here if you want to have a look. You can see achal is to eat, amar is to say, bo is to come or go in. So all of these are root words, and then we add prefix and suffixes. Now, the great news is that there are only 12 prefix and suffixes altogether. So if you learn the prefix and suffix and you learn the main words in Chumash, all you have to do is to memorize sharashim, root words, rather than having the tremendous difficulty of repeating, memorizing thousands of words, needlessly, because you're just gonna, if you do it by rote, that's the way it works. I encourage you, if you want to have a look at this piece, If you're watching a video, you can stop it here and take a look, or you can look in the chat section. So again, the big idea is to learn how the Hebrew language works. In our workbook, we have flashcards. Nouns and verbs are different colors. So, for example, aretz, over here, we'll watch the cursor, means land, and me artsecha is from your land. So a mem before a word means from, a lamed here, and the word before that, licha is for or to you. A vav means and, a yud means he. So if you work your way through these, through the pasuk, you can do so by just following the prefixes and suffixes. So vayomer, for example, is and he said. The vav is and, yud is he, amar is the shoresh said. Now, I'm going to just go through one pasuk together with the worksheets, and then you really can take it from there. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat section. I just want to digress a bit and go back to a big picture idea about language and how this all pulls together. The way, think of how languages are acquired. Now, generally speaking, we have, imagine you're an immigrant to a new country, or let's think of it differently. Let's say you're communicating, you have a worker over at the house, the person speaks a foreign language, doesn't really get the English that well. So what you do is you communicate just by using vocabulary words. That means what it will sound like, it'll sound something like, let's say you have a worker and you want the worker to take a pail and fill it with water and wash down the windows. So you would say, pail, water, windows, brush. So that, in other words, you just use words. And the research shows it depends on the language. There's a magic number. Once you know a certain number of words, you can have basic rudimentary conversations just by using those words. And again, if you think back at how we converse with people who don't speak English well, or if we're in a foreign country and you're trying to, let's say you're not that comfortable with Hebrew, you also start using words like that. You start taking individual words and communicating like that. And if you think back to when you attended school, the language arts programs have basically three components. There's a vocabulary list where you get a list of words. Then you have grammar, where you learn to string together, take these words and make sentences out of them. Now in English, we have a subject and a predicate, a noun and a verb, and then you build a sentence around that. So instead of saying pail, water, porch, or window, you'll say, please take the pail, fill it with water, and bring it to the window. So that's the second step. And then the third step, the third underpinning of a language arts program, the third one is context and understanding. If you remember back in school, your teacher said, make a sentence with each of the words. So you took vocabulary words, you learned a sentence structure, and then you had to understand what the words meant. And that was usually done one of two ways. Either your teacher gave you an assignment to make sentences out of those words, and then you were able to put them in context. Or what you would do is you would take a reader. I know I'm bringing you back to your childhood. If you go back to thinking of how a reader worked, you had a few paragraphs that had 20 vocabulary words in the context of a story, and then you acquired an understanding of the words by reading them in context. Now, if you think again, think about when we communicate with children, Typically, nouns are pretty easy for children or beginner learners to acquire. Take these here. You know, bias is a house, aretz land, or cup, a spoon, a bed. So that's pretty easy. You can either point to it or you can just show the children what it is. Children typically acquire, children and beginner learners acquire nouns more easily. Most verbs you need to, it's an action word, so you really need to put it in context. I told him a story. Halach is lech, go. We went to the store together. It's harder to explain without having that context. So when we designed this Chumash book, the governing principles of this book hopefully will help you get a better understanding of how Hebrew language works and how you can acquire these words. There's language and the words by understanding the system of how it pulls together. One more time again. So, me artzecha, aretz here, follow the cursor please. Aretz is land, and it's translated me artzecha, from your land. So mem is from, chaf is your, me artzecha, from your land. U mi bayis, and from the house of the, vayomer, and he said. So again, I'm going to show you now the way we structured the three types of worksheets, basically following those principles of vocabulary, grammar, literature. So this is the first worksheet here for this pasuk. This is pasuk Aleph. It's the first. Look at the cursor here. It's the first pasuk in Parshas Lech Lecha, and what we did is we took these vocabulary words, the shorashim, the root words that we identified, and we did a matching exercise. Again, this is designed, of course, for children, where many of them might not even be able to write that clearly. So we did matching. So Amar means to say, bias means a house. So if you were actually, if you were doing this worksheet, excuse me, you would take, you would connect them. Bias is house. Amar is to say. We have that already. Av is a father. Aretz we just had before is land. It's down below, and so that basically gives you just a working vocabulary. That's the purpose of that first worksheet, is to give you a working vocabulary, just to remind you of the words. In our workbook, we have flashcards in the back that you can look at, and the children collect them in a box and memorize them. So that is a memory tool. And what we did here, it's just, we did it for the kids in a more fun way. So here you have the chart on the bottom that has the prefix and suffix colors. So avav is and. So for example, if you were doing this as an exercise, so you would color this in blue. The vav is blue and is red. So the is haaretz, the land. So again, if you're doing it with your children, that's the way to go. Mem is from, which is green. So you fill the color in here. Using this color, the mem. Why it's not working? The color green. So the basic idea, again, this instead of, because Hebrew language doesn't have, we don't necessarily have as much emphasis on the sentences. It's more the word itself, because the words are complex and come together and are grouped together. Okay, and finally, the last thing we did here was we created these this matching on this side, on the right side here, those are words actually as they appear in the pasuk. Vayomer, you see, and he said, and they have to match them with the, they have to match them here with, oops, they have to match them with the word itself. I don't know why this is not working. One more time. So no, so Vayomer means is the shorish of Amar. Ar Eka, to I will see you, comes from the word Ra'ah, and this is the equivalent of literature, the equivalent of having a story where the words are already in context. Now, when the children learn it in Chumash, when they review the Chumash, they find the words in context itself. I'm going to activate the chat. It should have been activated before. If anybody, oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, thank you, Nanny. If you have any questions, you can type them in here, and I'll be glad to answer them. Again, let me just review again, just big picture. The idea behind this talk I'm giving tonight and this series, this workshop, this workbook, excuse me, is designed to help you acquire Chumash through a skills-based learning platform. So if you pick up, for example, any translation Chumash, you will find the word Vayomer, and he said, but it would not have the delineation between which part of the word means, means what. It just, and he said, then you're forced to, as I wrote in this article here, okay, that if you are just repeating, if you're learning, see here, there's basically two ways you can learn Chumash. You can learn by rote, where they have to repeat the entire, memorize the entire word, or a skills-based one where you break it down into language. Again, you can take a clip of this, or it's attached. I attached all the handouts to the talk. So, and again, for those who came later, this is a list of Hebrew verbs. 26 verbs are found in Chumash more than 500 times. Some of them are in the thousands. And again, the big idea of this approach to learning is to learn about structure, where you have prefix and suffix. There are only 12 suffixes. And then there are 35 shorashim in this book, in workbook number 1, but acquiring them makes a very, very big difference. And then your children or you don't need to remember all the every single word as a separate entity, but rather by having the building blocks, you're able to break it down by yourself. And as I said, here are the 3 different types of worksheets designed to give children the knowledge of root words. This is a vocabulary list. These are the words that are actually found in this pasuk. If you look at the right side here, blue are for verbs and green are for nouns. So this is, you actually can see this is a vocabulary list, and the object of this exercise is to be able to remember these words. This second sheet is a prefix and suffix. It's just a way through coloring to reinforce the type of what each of the suffixes mean. And the last one provides context. Nanny, your question about from what grade it's right to talk about roots, honestly, as soon as they start learning. The real, look, if you're thinking about it educationally, the real way to do it is to learn Hebrew as a language first. If you think of it this way, if you went to university and they gave a class in Hebrew Bible, in colleges they give you prerequisites, right? Before you learn biology, that you'll have to take a few beginner science classes or chemistry. So you always have prerequisites. Think about it. If you went to a college and you said you wanted to take a class in Hebrew Bible and Chumash, they would tell you to take 2 years of Hebrew first. So some of the schools do Ivrit Ivrit, meaning that the children at a very young age, usually in preschool, they already learn Hebrew. And usually, typically, many of these schools that translate into Ivrit, into Hebrew, they have in preschools, they employ Israelis who only speak to the kids in Hebrew. And when it works, it's great. Look at kids in Switzerland. They speak 4 languages by the time they're 6 years old because they hear different languages from different people in their lives. So that really is the right way to do it. But we designed this to do it sort of together. So rather than speaking Hebrew, we're just giving you the mechanics of how the Hebrew language works. And I believe you can do this right away. The reason I'm giving this class now, if your child is going to a school where they do teach it like this, then they probably should pick it up in school and you can reinforce it. Some of the schools do learn primarily or completely by rote, in which case you can help your child by teaching them the basics of how this goes. Nanny, did I answer your question? Please just text them. Let me know if that was helpful, or I'll just wait a couple of minutes if anybody has any other questions, and then we'll call it a night. You can take this handout and look it over, or it's actually the book is available. Also, if you go to if you have an Apple device, you can go to Apple Bookstore, Apple ebook store, and just type in Bright Beginning Chumash or Rabbi Rubicki. Satisfied? Good. That's glad. I'm glad you liked it. Good. So you can look it up there. But again, I encourage you to. Here's actually the second pasuk. Okay, ve'e'escha, and I will make you l'goy gadol, for a great nation. Ve'avarechacha. And again, some of those words you might recognize. For example, beis reish chaf. This is a verb. Verbs, we purposely did not put nikudot. We didn't put punctuation like we did in this shame. Let's say the word bracha comes from the same shorish. Ve'avarechacha. The shorish means to bless. Bracha is a blessing that you make. Vav before a word is and. Aleph is the first person I. Okay, so that's how the if you look at the way we did the it's not behaving. The way we did the translation was to break it down to see that the kids and learners should be able to understand that a vav means and that aleph means I will, and the beis reish chaf means to bless. So again, so gadol is someone who's big or great. Shem is somebody's name. And here you see the word actually in the. Here's a perfect example of how skills-based learning helps. Ve'avarechacha means, and I will bless you. That's Hashem speaking to Avram. Hashem speaking to God speaking to Abraham. Ve'avarechacha, and I will bless you. Ve'agadla, and I will make great shemecha, your name. Ve'heyeh, and you will be beracha, a blesser. So if your children are learning by rote, or if you learned by rote as a child, you have to memorize ve'avarechacha, and you have to memorize bracha, and without necessarily understanding why each one means what it means. So therefore, it's so helpful. It takes time to learn the system, but once you learn the system, it's so helpful. Actually, before we call it a night, if I may share a personal anecdote that was really very interesting. When we first published this book in 2010, I believe, and at about 2008 and 9, I went around raising money for the production of these books, and I went to an old student of mine who was actually in the watch business, and he was, I went, to solicit a gift from him. I met him in his office. It's nice to catch up with my student anyway. And his secretary, he was on a conference call. So the secretary was kind enough. She walked me into the into the conference room, and that was actually a showcase. They had a showcase of all the watches they made. There were probably a few hundred, maybe even a few thousand watches all around the room. 360. They had watches against the walls, and it was just so perfect. I was trying to explain to him. I didn't have the book, obviously. It was just an idea in my head. So when I sat down with my student, I said, "Tell me." So I said, "I'd like a purple watch that's waterproof, that has a tachometer in it. Where would I find it?" And he turned around and he said, "Right there." So I said, "Explain your system to me quickly." So he showed me that, what I totally forgot. But he had the vertically lined up by one by different fast attributes of this watch, and how that horizontal system was broken down with other things. And then I asked him, I said, "Listen, when you first started your business and you had 10 watches, did you need a system?" And he said, "No, we just put them out on the table." So, so I said it's the same thing with Chumash. You see, the reason that people like rote learning, because at the beginning it's very easy. In fact, Nanny, your question that you asked about the right grade, um, at the beginning, your child, if you try to teach them this skill of breaking the words down and deconstructing them to prefix, suffix, root words, they might tell you they're not responsible for it, or Mora, Rebbe doesn't make me know this. And they might think it's a waste of time because they can memorize the words. But what happens is the system that works for 10 watches, the system that works for, 30 psukim of Chumash, or even 300, stops, for many people, stops working when it just becomes too much to carry. And at that point, the system that you put in place by teaching them that there is a system to this is certainly, without a doubt, an investment of time. But I really think it's certainly well worth it. Okay, I hope you found it helpful. Again, I'll leave this up for a while. You can look at this comment section, and from scrolling up there, you can download all of those handouts or various forms there. And I thank you all for listening. I really hope you found it helpful. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful night.